Paul George's game has always fascinated me. Being the height of some centers and moving this fluidly, moving this confidently, and having developed this much creativity with the ball, it's something that has to be studied. And although he is super fluid, a lot of his game is pretty unorthodox too. There are little things that not many players do that we'll break down in this video. I want you guys to watch this, try some of these things out, and you never know what could really work for you. So let's dive into it all. So the first thing to notice that a lot of what we'll talk about is built off of is how he consistently elongates his dribble. His average dribble is a lot longer time-wise than everyone else. This allows him to do a few things. One, and most simply, just go slow. His pace is crazy, and much of that is a product of how he's able to slow the ball down as well. It also helps him time his bumps much easier, which he does a lot, since the ball is in his hand for an extended period of time. So, for example here, since he floats the ball, he could bump here, here, and then ends up bumping here since the ball is in his hand. He's not in a dribble. It also makes it easier to change heights with the dribble since his hand stays on the ball longer, which gives him the ability to be in control up here and down here. So like here, watch how his hand stays on the ball the entire way down, so he's in control pretty much the whole time. Elongating this dribble also helps him flow and move with the ball without having to dribble every step or two. So this could be to cover ground laterally, like you see here where that ball is just floating in his hand as he's moving to the side, or moving forward by a defender. And usually the game becomes much easier for ball handlers who can cover more ground with each dribble.
Best offensive teams. George dancing too soon.
And finally, with this longer dribble, he's able to get his feet active and moving on a first step without relying on waiting for the dribble to get back to his hand. So for example, splitting his feet and exploding by a defender while that ball is floating. And that brings me into the timing conversation. Notice how unorthodox his timing is.
Right now, keeps his dribble, gets by Porter.
Most players explode right here, when it feels most comfortable and most rhythmic, but PG constantly delays it a bit.
Here's Alex Lynn trying to close out on Paul George.
Or maybe does the opposite and goes early in the dribble sometimes.
This game, hopefully
as well as using setups like delayed betweens to kill defenders. This does take elite footwork though, which PG impressively has for a longer player. And as I mentioned plenty of times, being able to get to this position or shin angle to punch yourself forward is one of the key KPIs with any ball handler. And doing so quickly, powerfully, and from any position. Next up, I want to talk about posture. Because although he does change heights very well and he will lift up to a vertical torso, he's constantly playing out of a forward lean, even before he goes, like damn near every time. This makes it much easier to explode out of a standstill since his center of gravity is already oriented forward and he's already in that forward lean that he's going to have to get into regardless when he wants to attack. Plus, maintaining this forward lean helps him keep that momentum rolling downhill as he attacks. It's almost like he's playing on a downhill slope, where that momentum just keeps rolling towards where he wants to go. And when you balance this out with the control to decelerate and not get out of control, this is super dangerous. And in fact, to me, it allows him to get into these shifty decelerations much easier from this downhill drive. And he's more than strong enough and coordinated enough to decelerate even at unorthodox timings like this. And on top of him being faster out of this, it also makes defenders super sensitive to quick moves and shifts because they know this. They know he can get by quicker. Like here, they know he can explode in a millisecond because he's already in that lane, so they're going to be way more likely to jump that direction when he shifts. Now obviously, this also makes it important to be able to shoot from this position where he starts in that forward lane and then raises the torso into the shot like you see here.
On Sunday, George. They don't want to screen. George, free throw line jump.
And even jump from that position and going from a forward lean and do an explosive 2-foot finish. Also watch how oftentimes he orients himself to his left, with his chest damn near facing the sideline. This is pretty unique, but it's really worked for him. And this is possible and dangerous because he's super comfortable shooting from his left hip, which makes this tough for a defender because you got to get close enough to get a good contest on this shot, but you also don't want to step up and suffocate his space too much, considering how creative he is, how explosive he is, and how easily he can go by defenders. And he may even get here out of a crossover or off of a ball screen, which puts the defense in a tough position because again, now they have to cover more ground to get to that left hip, and he can fake super creatively out of this.
The ball each is his dominant hand. Westbrook is a left-handed.
Other times he'll go with a staggered between, which is also super dangerous because it closes the space a bit on the defender. So now that front foot is close to their frame. And as we talked about earlier, even on these, he keeps his hand on that dribble for much longer than most, which allows him to change speed and have the ultimate control. Next is how comfortable he is in close quarters with defenders, which is one of the things that truly makes him special with the ball in his hand. He's trying to attack and get to his spot, and if he gets cut off, he's not avoiding the contact. Now, he's usually not bullying his way through, but just comfortably battling to get the defender off balance and keep the ball positioned away from the defender to avoid any risk. Many times he'll literally end up just bouncing off the defender like this and then working from there. Or he'll use that controlled forward lane to drive through the defender's hip with power, all while once again keeping that ball away. Now, in terms of shifting defenders, he's able to load, I'd say, 80 to 100% of his weight on one leg, which at 6'10 is wild. But it allows him to get into these super exaggerated patient shifts, which especially out of a forward lean and a slow pace like this are lethal. It's not every time though, and he utilizes all these other tools to shift defenders without putting his body through that every time. Then after he shifts defenders, he's great at using these little speed changes mid-stride to throw off their angle and timing, even if it's just a little heavy step like this.
George spins, double team, still gets it to go. A couple of former teammates with the Raptors in 2019.
He's also one of the more adaptable dribblers I've ever seen, especially with contact. Like you see here, sometimes a good defender will knock him off balance. They'll match his level of physicality, and some players will let this mess them up. And PG's not only able to stay on balance, but actually use this to his advantage. Like here, he uses that backwards momentum to explode forward and get into something good. On top of this, he definitely loses it sometimes, which is going to happen when you're 6'10 and play like this, handle the ball this creatively. But he recovers it really well, and honestly is able to use this to his advantage once again, because this recovery throws defenders off. The mindset is never, oh shoot, I'm off balance, I lost the ball, I got hit. It's alright, bet, how can I make this work?
Thunder. EG trying to shake.
And then lastly is just the demeanor. It's scary having someone who really wants to and can f you up on every single play with simple stuff too. You know it, he knows it, and like many of the great players I break down, he just emits confidence. Even on a simple closeout or ball screen, he's not worried about turning it over, but rather doing whatever he can to create and get to space. And that's not easy to guard. So as I always say, now that you've absorbed all this info and these ideas, go out, experiment, and make them your own. Go play 1v1 and try these techniques out. Go to the court and just feel all these things out. You'd be surprised at how much you can add to your game. As always, appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to drop a comment. Let me know who you want to see broken down next, what ideas, what players, and I'll make sure to get it to you. Till next time.